You know that feeling when you've painstakingly prepped the finest, rarest ingredients, only for the head chef to scoop them up and use them as a forgotten garnish for someone else's basic dish. That was my life with Vader Thorne. My name is Raiden Miller, and for over a year I'd been her culinary confidant, her emergency pantry, and her emotional whipping boy, always meticulously prepared on the sidelines, but perpetually excluded from the main course. I'm a sous chef at one of the city's most respected fine dining establishments, a master of precise timing, intense focus, flavor balance, and keeping the entire kitchen running when the pressure gauge redlines. Yet in my own emotional kitchen, the timing was always off, the focus was blurry, and my self-worth was chronically under-seasoned. I met Vader at the highly anticipated grand opening of the Gilded Spoon, the high-end restaurant where I had just secured my first major position. She was there as a promising culinary journalist and rising food critic, sharp, devastatingly chic, in a way that made everyone else look like they were wearing ill-fitting uniforms, and possessed of a smile that could melt the most stubborn fondue. Every eye in the room tracked her movements. She moved through the crowd with an almost unsettling magnetic quality, her voice a low intellectual hum as she interviewed the head chef and expertly dissected the layers of the amuse-bouche. I was the guy in the crisp white uniform, my hands precise, ensuring the salmon canapes were perfectly aligned and the elaborate ice sculptures didn't drip onto the marble floor. My primary function was to be perfectly efficient and invisible. At first, I mistook her professional intensity for genuine romantic interest. She was so fascinated by the intricate dance of my work. Raiden, the way you articulate the process of fermentation. It's like poetry, she'd say, her eyes wide with a focused admiration that felt alarmingly intimate. She had an insatiable hunger for details, texting me constantly to ask about the provenance of rare herbs, sending me snaps of dishes she was reviewing for my professional opinion, calling me late at night to discuss the abstract philosophy behind a 6-course tasting menu. I truly believed we were painstakingly building a beautiful, slow-cooked connection, a main course destined for greatness. But then came the conversation that tasted like a bitter, over-reduced sauce. It happened after a particularly grueling Saturday dinner service, the kind that leaves you vibrating with exhaustion and adrenaline. She'd stopped by the kitchen back door, looking effortlessly composed in a silk dress, to drop off a copy of her latest magazine feature. "You are, honestly, the most thoughtful, intuitive man I've ever encountered, Raiden," she said, leaning against the cold stainless steel of the service counter, her expression soft, almost vulnerable. "Like, I could never lose you. You're my gold standard, my emotional compass, my tasting panel of one, the baseline for everything genuine, tasting panel of one." The phrase echoed in the empty kitchen, translation, the reliable, sober palate she ran to when the fleeting, exciting flavors of her actual love life went completely rancid. The comforting, predictable, high-quality soup she'd never admit she secretly needed, but would never publicly order. And she ran to me, with exhausting regularity. Every few weeks she was enthralled by a new signature obsession. Ashton, the arrogant, hyper-confident mixologist whose cocktails were flashier than his substance. Caleb, the intense, self-absorbed gallery owner who only spoke in obscure cultural references. Lucien, the smooth, well-travelled sommelier whose charm was bottled and preserved for immediate consumption. Each one was a confident, sometimes aloof man who probably couldn't discern the difference between a high-quality stock and instant broth, but who somehow possessed the magnetic key to her immediate, intense attention. She'd show me their infuriatingly casual texts, ask for my strategic advice on how to respond, sometimes even sigh with a calculated wistfulness, "Why can't I just find someone with your depth, Raiden, your unwavering devotion?" Every time, a small, painful, hollow laugh would involuntarily escape me. "Yeah, I know. Crazy, right? Deep down, the truth was stark and cold. She didn't want my depth. She just wanted my undivided devotion as a reliable, non-intrusive side dish. The pattern became the bedrock of our strange, one-sided relationship. I was a fixture, a beautiful antique piece of furniture in her life, but the gravity of the dynamic never shifted. Veda would occasionally visit me at the restaurant, sit at the chef's counter, rave enthusiastically about a new, complex flavor pairing I'd created, and then keep me up until 2 a.m. discussing the intricacies of her latest heartbreak. But the second Ashton or Lucian re-entered her orbit, I'd instantly deflate and become part of the background kitchen equipment again, no more significant than the blast chiller or the walk-in fridge. She'd be routinely late for our supposedly important quiet coffee sessions because, Lucian insisted on showing me his vintage wine collection, and the time just evaporated, or she'd cancel a reservation last minute because Caleb had a last-minute flight to Milan and truly needed my counsel. I'd always perform my professional persona flawlessly, pretending that the stinging disappointment didn't register, but every time I felt like the gas valve on my emotional burner was being slowly, deliberately turned down. I was training myself to subsist on the emotional crumbs she sporadically tossed my way. Occasionally, she'd notice my quiet, almost manic focus on my work, and her perfectly defined eyebrows would express concern. "You all right, Raiden? You've been unusually absent lately, all heat and no personality. Just wrestling with a tricky emulsification process, I'd lie, precisely wiping down the immaculate granite countertop. It demands total concentration." She'd smile, a flash of something genuine in her eyes, mixed with a hint of proprietary concern. "Don't you dare go disappearing on me, okay? You are the best ingredient in my life, you ground me." That was her ultimate talent, articulating something that sounded profound and flattering to keep me mentally anchored, but which was ultimately too abstract and non-committal to imply any real future. And every time, like an addict craving a fix, I consumed it all. She wasn't an overtly cruel person. She was simply entitled to my constant availability. She knew I would always drop my plans, always offer my most intelligent advice, always be the steady, grounding force who meticulously reminded her she was worth 1,000 times more, even when she continuously treated my efforts as functionally worthless. I fiercely defended the arrangement to myself. Better to be a reliable, essential emotional tool than to be nothing at all. But the ugly truth was beginning to form a thick, unbearable sludge. She only needed me when the unreliable, exciting, high-status flavors had temporarily removed themselves from her life. And that realization was beginning to corrode my self-esteem, more acidic than I dared to admit. My professional discipline translated seamlessly to her personal drama. I could predict her emotional service cycle with terrifying accuracy. If Veda was visibly glowing, flooding her social media with high-definition glamour shots from exclusive events, and talking animatedly about her career trajectory, it meant a new, captivating man was giving her his full, intense attention. If she was suddenly silent on social media, then texting me lengthy, emotionally draining paragraphs about the superficiality of men, it meant the attention had abruptly ceased. And that's when the inevitable, always late, call would interrupt my quiet evening, always on the heels of someone else's rejection. "Raiden, please tell me you're not asleep yet." "I'm sorry to call so late. I'm here, Veda. What's going on?" He just ghosted me. No warning, no explanation. We were discussing moving in together. He said I was his muse. How can someone just vanish like that? I'd stay tethered to the phone for hours, meticulously laying out all the reasons why she deserved a 5-star man, why her intellect was intimidating, and that the right person would truly see her magnificent value. And she'd inevitably end with the line that was both the high point and the low point of my week. "That's why I love you, Raiden. You always know how to restore the flavor profile and recalibrate my focus." Except She didn't love me. She loved how effortlessly and consistently I made her feel about herself. She loved the deep validation, the bottomless, effortless comfort, the constant, predictable presence. I was her emotional mise en place, the perfectly organized, perfectly prepared ingredients she could run to when every outside rejection made her feel incomplete. But every time she finished those calls, feeling renewed and significantly lighter, I was the one left with the heavy, unwashed emotional residue, because the second she felt better, she'd naturally, inevitably, drift. Back to the same fleeting, captivating men, back to the same self-inflicted heartaches. And I'd be waiting in the exact same spot, pretending I wasn't slowly incinerating my own feelings. The breaking point arrived on a rainy night. She had called, utterly distraught, claiming Caleb had brutally critiqued her latest article in public. I talked her through a massive emotional breakdown, reminding her of her professional triumphs until her sobs subsided. Just before she hung up, a soft, almost patronizing laugh escaped her. "You're honestly the best, Raiden. You're like the brother who always makes the perfect grounding comfort food when the world feels too cruel." Brother. The word was a final cold plate, definitively defining my meager portion in her life and extinguishing the last flame of romantic hope. I hung up the phone that night and stared into the fluorescent glow of the city lights outside my window, realizing that every ounce of comfort I offered was an ounce of my own irreplaceable self-respect I was hemorrhaging. After that definitive brother declaration, the quiet internal shift began. I didn't announce my departure, I simply and silently began to increase my professional distance and unavailability. Fewer immediate text responses, substantially slower replies, and a rigid, immovable schedule that didn't allow for her last-minute intrusions. For the first time in over a year, I didn't lunge for my phone the millisecond it illuminated with her name. I started spending more time obsessively perfecting a difficult new 15-step classical French dish, aggressively focused on my career trajectory, and actively socializing with new colleagues who actually asked perceptive questions about my goals and dreams. And to my surprise, it worked, until Veda's perfectly choreographed world registered the subtle but significant absence. At first, her approach was gentle. A quick, "You've been incredibly off the grid lately. Is the kitchen that overwhelming?" Then, a few days later, a more pointed text, "I haven't seen your name in my notifications in days. What gives?" And finally, the meticulously calculated guilt trip. Did I mismanage the ingredients? Did I unintentionally offend you? That last question landed with the calculated accuracy of a dropped blade. She was trying to shift the blame, making me feel accountable for the distance I was establishing to protect myself from the situation she had created. When I didn't immediately scramble to reassure her, she escalated her strategy. Suddenly, she wanted all my time, all my attention. "Let's grab a late-night dessert after your service, my treat. Raiden, I genuinely miss our deep dives. We haven't had a proper soul connection in ages." And, in a moment of lingering weakness, I conceded to one final coffee session, because even though I intellectually knew she was trying to suck me back into her powerful gravitational field, hearing her utter the words, "I miss you," still caused a predictable emotional spike. We met the following Saturday. For the first 20 minutes, it almost recaptured the old, hopeful times. Easy conversation, shared, genuine laughs about a notorious dining experience. Until her phone vibrated and her face became a mask of blinding, almost competitive delight. "Oh, it's Caleb. He finally messaged me back about that exclusive gallery event." I knew he would eventually. Just like that, the air instantly went cold, and I was invisible again, the perfect coffee forgotten. She glanced up, caught the faint, tired resignation on my face, and softened her tone immediately. "Don't look at me like that, Raiden. You know you're my favorite person to talk to, my absolute constant." The truth was laid bare on the table. She didn't say it to make me feel cherished or chosen. She said it to ensure I stayed perfectly preserved on the shelf, easily accessible the next time she needed me. It took me an embarrassingly long time to fully grasp the toxic recipe. Every single time an exciting, temporary man disappeared from Veda's life, I would miraculously become her favorite, most valuable confidant again. Every single time a new, captivating man showed genuine interest, I would instantly fade into the ether, a dull, forgotten background hum. It was a cycle of emotional manipulation, and she had me precisely where she wanted me. After the absolute constant line, I didn't respond to Veda's text about Caleb for 3 full days. I was done being the fast-acting emotional yeast she used to raise her spirits, only to be tossed aside when the dough was ready. I buried myself in the controlled chaos of the kitchen. I stopped checking her stories. I started saying no to her late-night calls, letting them ring once, then silencing the phone, telling myself the new foie gras preparation demanded my undivided attention. It was difficult, like breaking an addiction, but for the first time, the silence on my end felt less like anxiety and more like a quiet form of self-respect. The predictable pattern shifted the moment she realized her reliable safety net was slowly being folded up and put away. Her initial reactions were subtle, disguised as professional check-ins. Saw your review in Gourmet today. Incredible, Raiden. Text me the recipe for the amuse-bouche. It sounds revolutionary. I'd reply professionally, short and strictly about the food. No emojis, no compliments, no invitation for a deeper conversation. Then came the escalation. You've been so focused on the restaurant lately. Are you mad at me? Did I say something out of line? She texted one evening. Mad at her? I almost laughed. No, Veda, I typed back simply. Just focused on my career. We're opening a new section soon. She didn't reply for an hour, which was a geologic age for her. When she finally did, it was a sudden, manufactured burst of attention. Suddenly, she was everywhere. She started showing up at the restaurant's adjacent cafe, a spot she never frequented, claiming she was meeting other critics. She'd linger, making sure she was spotted. Raiden, you look great. Have you been working out? You look sharper. The same girl who used to wax poetic about Lucien's poetic collarbones was suddenly noticing my physique. It wasn't genuine interest. It was panic disguised as praise. She was noticing my distance, not my development. One afternoon I was at the city's main farmers market, focused on sourcing a specific microgreen. I was laughing easily with Anya, a botanist and small-scale artisan farmer who supplied our more unusual produce. Anya was the anti-Veda, grounded, smelled like fresh soil and herbs, and spoke with an honest, unfiltered clarity. She didn't seek attention, she just effortlessly commanded it through her passion. We were discussing the delicate balance of bitter and acidic flavors when I felt a presence beside me. Well, hello, stranger, Veda's voice chimed, artificially bright. She looked out of place, dressed impeccably among the mud and produce. She glanced pointedly at Anya, who was holding a beautiful handful of purple edible flowers. Didn't know you traded your kitchen for the fields, Raiden. Who is your new source? Anya smiled politely, a calm, easy warmth that contrasted sharply with Veda's strained intensity. I'm Anya. We're discussing the nutritional value of this new mustard green, she said, extending a hand to Veda. Veda barely acknowledged the hand, her eyes flicking between me and the unusual ingredients Anya held. Cute. Raiden usually only discusses rare French imports with me. Didn't know you had a thing for local weeds. She tried to make it sound playful, but her jaw was slightly rigid. I stepped in, my voice neutral. Anya is one of the best. Her approach to sustainability is fascinating. Veda forced a laugh. Of course. Well, I just needed to tell you the head critic wants to meet you, Raiden. I mentioned your new tasting menu. Don't forget who opens doors for you. She gave me a tight, proprietary smile, then walked away without another word to Anya. Anya watched her go, then turned to me, a small, knowing smirk on her face. Wow, is she always that generous with her subtle shade? I shrugged, trying to dismiss the tension. That's just Vader, intense about her work. It didn't sound like work, Anya replied, her eyes sharp. It sounded like a territorial display over a rare, organic truffle. Her directness was jarring, refreshing, and utterly truthful. From that day forward, Vader's behavior became a textbook case of relational sabotage, disguised as friendly concern. Anya and I began spending more time together outside the market, casual, easy meetups that felt like a calm, cooling draft after years of intense, high-pressure steam. We talked about everything, my ambition to open my own specialized restaurant, her struggles with pests, our shared love for finding the perfect, honest flavor. There were no games, no guessing, no waiting hours for a strategic text reply. It was just two people co-creating a simple, honest recipe. Vader noticed immediately. She began calling again, often late, often on a night she knew I was meeting Anya. She'd leave voice notes full of nostalgic references, tagging me in old photos of us studying together, that is her crying over some guy while I held cue cards. It was all an attempt to remind me of the comfortable, predictable us that existed before I started to reclaim my own space. Then came the escalating, targeted flirting, always delivered with an air of plausible deniability. I saw you and Anya talking about those bizarre edible flowers today. Honestly, you only look that passionate when you're talking about food, Raiden. I always found that so attractive. Another time, you've completely elevated the presentation of your dishes lately. You should dress like that more often. It really suits you. Anya is lucky to have a friend who inspires her creativity so much. That last one made me pause. A friend who inspires her creativity. For months, I had been an emotional dumping ground. Now, suddenly, I was a source of inspiration she wanted to claim credit for. The turning point came when I ran into Vader at a high-end culinary trade show. I was there with Anya, looking at innovative kitchen tech. We were focused, discussing the practical applications of a new thermal circulator. Vader walked by, saw us, and her smile instantly solidified. She stopped and addressed me with a tone that was sickly sweet, yet clearly designed for Anya's ears. "Raiden! Oh my gosh, I almost didn't recognize you. You look so happy. It's been ages since you've seen me. You've been so obsessed with your little side projects." She paused, her eyes challenging Anya. "Anya, you'll have to forgive Raiden. He can be a bit single-minded. I usually have to drag him out of the kitchen. We're like family, you know. I try to keep him grounded in reality." Anya, who had been listening calmly, didn't flinch. She simply tilted her head, her calm gaze holding Vader's sharp one. "It sounds like you're trying to keep him tethered, Vader. Raiden has incredible drive. Maybe you just don't like when he aims for something you can't control." Vader's smile vanished. Her composure, always her finest suit of armor, cracked. For a full, silent beat, she stared at Anya, then at me. There was no denial, no rebuttal. Just the naked, raw realization that her authority, her ability to define my role, had been challenged by an outsider who was effortlessly, naturally, becoming an insider. Later that night, I got the text I had been waiting for, the one that held no pretense of professional courtesy or friendly concern. It was long, desperate, and filled with manufactured remorse. I don't even know why I'm saying this, but I miss how we used to be. I think I messed things up. I pushed away the one person who actually gave me unconditional support. I thought I wanted the flashy, trendy men, but maybe I was wrong. I think I made a grave mistake, Raiden. I missed my best friend for months. These were the words I had craved like a hungry chef craves a Michelin star. And now that they were finally here, they tasted stale. I read it twice, sat with the manufactured weight of her confession, and then I put my phone down. She didn't miss me. She missed the comfortable, unquestioning attention, the endless supply of validation, the security of being the center of my predictable world. and now that I had pulled my own gravity back, she was panicked, desperate to pull me back into her orbit. I didn't call her out, I didn't get angry, I simply waited. The next morning I sent a single clear reply. I'm glad you're reflecting, Vader. I will always value our history, but things have been different for a long time. I hope you find the perspective you need. I didn't use the word friend or family, I simply acknowledged the history. The reply left no space for argument, no opening for a return. She left me on read for 4 long hours, a silent explosion of frustration. Then came the final, retaliatory text of part 2. I hate how distant you've become. You're changing, Raiden, and not for the reasons you think. I didn't answer because the truth was, I had changed. I had stopped volunteering to be hurt. I wasn't distant. I had simply stopped pretending to be available, and Vader could feel her exclusive ownership of my attention, her priceless, emotional, organic truffle slipping through her fingers. Vader's final text, I hate how distant you've become. You're changing, Raiden, and not for the reasons you think, was her desperate attempt to plant a seed of doubt, suggesting my newfound peace was based on a faulty foundation. I didn't engage. I left the message unanswered, finally realizing that silence was the most powerful response I could offer. After that exchange, Vader did what she always did when she felt an intense loss of control. She manufactured a distracting highlight reel. Suddenly, her social media was ablaze with stories, healing not hurting captions over expensive brunches, selfies with captions like finding my core strength era, and, inevitably, the strategic, blurry inclusion of a random new guy's expensive watch or tattooed arm in the corner of her photos. It was a calculated performance, a grand display designed for an audience of one, me. She wanted me to react. She wanted me to ask where she was, who she was with, to show any sign that I still cared about her movements. But this time, I didn't. No views on her dramatic stories, no late-night texts asking for details. My attention was focused where it should have been all along, my career and Anya. Meanwhile, my connection with Anya was deepening, slowly, naturally, and honestly. She was a breath of fresh air, a perfect, honest flavor profile. No pretense, no guessing games, no emotional tug-of-war. Just 2 people who genuinely enjoyed each other's presence and respected each other's passion. Anya didn't need to compete for attention, she just effortlessly held mine. A few days after my non-response, Vader tested the boundary again. Guess who is asking me to collaborate on a feature? She texted, referring to the head critic who had previously only acknowledged her through me. I knew she was fishing for the old, admiring Raiden. I waited an hour, then simply typed, "That's excellent news. Keep me posted on the publication date." That was it. I didn't ask who, or how did you manage that, or offer any of the effusive praise she craved. One precise, professional sentence. I could almost feel her frustration vibrating through the screen. She replied tersely, "You used to care about my career more." "I still care," I typed back. "I just have less time for the drama surrounding it." After that, she went quiet for a while, a genuine deep silence. The kind of silence that used to send me spiraling into anxiety, making me desperately check my phone, but now it felt like an oasis of peace and autonomy. Funny how the person who once wielded her attention like a weapon suddenly felt powerless when you simply stopped needing their approval. It happened one mundane Tuesday afternoon. I was walking out of the restaurant after a long service, my headphones in, the scent of fresh bread and smoke clinging to my chef whites, when the realization hit me with the quiet certainty of a perfectly set custard. I hadn't thought about Vader at all that day. No overanalyzing old calls, no checking if she was lurking on my socials, no wondering about her latest crush. Just peace. It wasn't the peace of forgetting, it was the peace of outgrowing. I started devoting more time to Anya. We began creating collaborative, experimental pop-up dishes for the restaurant's private events, combining my technique with her exotic, rare produce. The energy between us was collaborative, respectful, and electric. People noticed the change in me. "You seem lighter," Anya observed one evening as we were plating a dish. "Like you finally took off a chef's coat that was 2 sizes too small." And she was right. The constant draining weight of trying to be what Vader needed had vanished. The final collision came a few weeks later. Anya and I were at a well-known culinary bookstore discussing techniques for plating minimalist desserts. We were laughing about a shared mistake we'd made when Vader walked in. She spotted us immediately. For a split second I saw it, a raw, ugly flash of genuine jealousy that she couldn't immediately mask with a practiced smile. She approached our table, her eyes darting between my easy demeanor and Anya's relaxed posture. "Hey, Raiden," she said, her voice strained, yet trying to sound breezy. "I didn't think you ever left the kitchen." I gave her a polite, distant smile. "Hello, Vader. Just stocking up." Her gaze lingered on Anya. "You two seem awfully cozy over these obscure plating books. Is this a professional consultation, or are we finally admitting this is a side relationship?" Anya calmly closed the book she was holding, her composure never wavering. "It's honest conversation, Vader. The kind that doesn't require games." Vader ignored her, focusing solely on me. Her voice dropped, taking on that soft, manipulative tone that used to disarm me instantly. "Raiden, can we talk outside? Just for a second, I need to apologize for being so childish lately." I almost instinctively stood up. But then I looked at Anya, who simply met my eyes with calm expectation, and I knew this was the final test. The moment I needed to define the menu of my life once and for all. "You don't need to apologize to me, Vader," I said, my voice quiet, firm, and entirely devoid of the old longing. "If you need to apologize, you can do it here. I don't keep secrets anymore." Her mouth tightened. She knew she couldn't engage in her customary emotional theater in front of Anya. Her eyes glazed over, a flicker of genuine distress replacing the practiced arrogance. "This is not fair, Raiden. You're trying to publicly humiliate me." I shook my head slowly. "No, I'm just stopping the private self-destruction. You said I was your safe person, Vader, but I realized that was just code for the man who would sacrifice his own romantic feelings to constantly validate yours. You only wanted me around when the men you actually desired weren't available." Vader's composure completely crumbled. Her breathing hitched. "That's a cruel thing to say." "I cared about you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You cared about the comfort I provided," I countered, keeping my tone level. "You loved that I was an open reservation you could always fall back on. You didn't miss me, Vader. You missed the control you had over me. And now that I'm cooking my own recipes, you're trying to sabotage the plate." She stood there, defeated by her own transparency. She knew I had finally articulated the precise cold truth of our dynamic. After a long, agonizing silence, she whispered, "So, you're really choosing her? After everything?" I looked at Anya, whose face was open, honest, and free of judgment. Then I looked back at Vader. "I'm not choosing her over you, Vader," I said. "I'm choosing myself over the version of myself that you made me." I stood up slowly. "Goodbye, Vader. I wish you well." I then walked away with Anya, leaving Vader standing alone between the stacks of cookbooks. For the first time, walking away didn't feel like abandoning a course. It felt like finishing a toxic, protracted meal and finally moving on to something clean and nourishing. The aftermath was quiet. Vader didn't text again. Her social media went from performative joy to genuine silence, suggesting she had finally been forced to confront the absence of her constant security blanket. A few months later, Anya and I were sitting in my small apartment, reviewing the plans for the tiny, specialized restaurant we were opening, a collaborative effort built on mutual respect and shared passion. My phone buzzed. It was an email notification. Vader. She had sent me a link to her latest article. It was a thoughtful, well-written piece on the difficulty of finding genuine connection in the cutthroat culinary world. Attached was a short professional note. Raiden, I saw this and immediately thought of our many discussions. I wish you the best with your new venture. You have a vision. I'm glad you finally built a table that suits you. It wasn't a sweeping apology. It wasn't a declaration of love. It was a quiet acknowledgement of a boundary she could no longer cross. I smiled, not bitterly, but with genuine closure. I didn't need her regret. The closure was already present in the peace I felt sitting next to Anya, who saw my worth without needing me to shrink first. Later, Anya looked at me, her eyes reflecting the warm, soft light of the apartment. She seems like she's finally letting go. I wrapped my arm around her. She is, I said, because I finally taught her that I'm not a side dish, Anya. I'm the head chef now, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt like the choice, the constant, and the perfectly balanced main course of my own life. This concludes the three-part story of Raiden Miller. Epilogue: The Perfect Blend. 2 years later, the scent of thyme and roasting lamb filled the small, perfectly designed space of the Anchor, my new restaurant. It was small, minimalist, and built entirely on the principles of honesty and balance, qualities I now insisted upon, both in my food and my life. Anya and I ran it as partners. She managed the supply and flavor profiles, providing the rare, hyper-local ingredients. I controlled the technique and execution. We were a seamless blend, a perfectly achieved emulsion. We sat at the chef's table late one Friday night after the last guest had left. Anya was looking over the week's financial reports, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. I was polishing the last of the silverware, a meditative habit. You know, Anya mused, looking up from the figures, Vader reviewed us last month. I stopped polishing, though the news didn't cause the familiar spike of anxiety it once would have. I know. I read it. She looked surprised. You did? You usually avoid her work. It felt different this time, I explained, placing the spoon down. It was titled, The Quiet Power of Integrity. She didn't rave about the food, Anya. She simply described the feeling of the place. She wrote that the Anchor was a meal that doesn't demand attention, but earns it through consistency and a refusal to compromise its core values. She gave us 4 out of 5 stars, but the review itself felt like a higher rating. Anya nodded, understanding immediately. She respected the boundaries you set, even in her writing. Exactly, I said, leaning back. It wasn't about the food. It was her final, quiet acknowledgement that the new foundation was real. The thought of Vader no longer brought tension or bitterness, just a distant, objective clarity like reviewing a challenging recipe from the past. I didn't hate her, I simply recognized the difference between an appetizer and a commitment. Anya pushed the papers aside and rested her hand over mine. You've completely changed the menu of your life, Raiden. No more side dishes. I smiled, squeezing her hand. The flavors are better now. Simpler, but truer. I looked around the quiet, humming kitchen, at the precisely organized workstations and the pristine copper pots. I was no longer the unseen sous chef waiting for crumbs of validation. I was the master of my own kitchen, working alongside someone who saw me not as a reliable escape, but as an equal collaborator in the creation of something beautiful and lasting. The true comfort, I realized, wasn't in being someone else's safe person. It was in being your own, finally whole, and fully available for the person who chooses to sit at your table every single day.